They say power reveals the truth, but sometimes it slaps it straight across the face. Monday morning, Charleston, South Carolina. The courtroom was barely half full. Just a few sleepy lawyers, a tired clerk, 2 uniformed officers posted at the back, and 1 man pacing at the front. Sergeant Ryan Colton, mid-40s, clean-shaven, muscles tight under a starched uniform. He barked at the clerk like he owned the building. "I've got better things to do," he snapped. "Let's move this along." At the defense table sat a nervous black teenager, Jalen Price. 16. Thin. Eyes wide like he'd just stepped out of a nightmare. His public defender whispered something, but Colton didn't care. This was routine. Another day. Another punk. Another charge he barely bothered justifying. What he didn't realize was that this morning was different. A woman entered the courtroom quietly. No robe. No nameplate. No grand entrance. Just a neat navy blazer. Silver hair tied in a bun, and eyes like still water right before a storm. Naomi Ellison, the first black woman to ever sit on Charleston's highest bench. But to Colton, she was just another face. He didn't glance twice when she picked up a case file from the clerk's desk. Didn't pause when she walked toward the prosecution table. Didn't think, didn't ask, didn't care. Until she didn't move when he told her to. "I'm talking to you," he barked, stepping forward. She didn't flinch. And then, smack. His open palm cracked across her face. The sound cut through the room like a gunshot. Gasps. Papers stopped rustling. Even the ceiling fan seemed to freeze mid-turn. And Naomi, she didn't move. She didn't raise her hand, didn't stumble, didn't say a word. She just turned her head, slowly. Locked eyes with the man who'd just laid hands on her. And in that moment, everything changed. Because that slap, it wasn't just an assault. It was a trigger, a spark, a declaration. Au revoir. Colton's smirk faltered for half a second. "You people need to learn respect," he muttered. He didn't notice the way the bailiff froze. He didn't hear the pen hit the floor behind the gallery. He didn't see the lawyer in the back raise her phone, already recording. And he definitely didn't see the trap he'd just stepped into. Because Naomi Ellison wasn't a clerk, wasn't an assistant. She was the judge. And in the next 4 minutes, his entire empire would begin to crumble. Charleston had always been a city dressed in contradictions. Cobblestone streets and glossy history books. But underneath, the old scars never fully healed. Behind the charm and the Spanish moss, there was something else. A tension you could feel in your teeth. Judge Naomi Ellison knew that tension well. At 62, she carried herself with the quiet force of a woman who'd fought for every inch of respect. And still had to defend it every time she walked into a room. She was the daughter of school teachers who couldn't vote until they were in their 30s. She'd marched in protests before she could spell jurisdiction. And she'd sat in classrooms where professors forgot her name every semester. But she endured. Graduated top of her class, became a defense attorney for the voiceless, then a prosecutor who wouldn't play politics, and finally, after 3 decades of being called everything but equal, she was appointed as Charleston's first black female circuit judge. But the appointment didn't silence the whispers. It made them louder. They called her an activist in robes, said she was too emotional, too soft on criminals, too hard on cops. They never said too smart, never said too brave, but they thought it. Naomi didn't need their praise. She needed the truth. She read every case file herself, made her own notes, took her time, because justice couldn't be rushed. But she also knew the system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed. She'd seen the same names appear in complaint after complaint. The same officers, the same prosecutors, the same mysteriously lost evidence, the same kids, black, brown, poor, pleading out instead of standing trial. And one name kept showing up: Sergeant Ryan Colton, 20 years in uniform, decorated, untouchable, third-generation law enforcement. He was a legacy. And legacies in Charleston were rarely questioned. Naomi had flagged 3 of his cases for internal review. All 3 were quietly closed due to insufficient cause. No follow-up, no discipline, and no surprise. Charleston protected its own, but Naomi had seen it too many times. Colton's arrogance, his aggression, his belief that he was the law. She'd once told her clerk, Isaiah Brooks, "The most dangerous man isn't the one who breaks the rules. It's the one who thinks he writes them." So that Monday morning, when she walked into the courtroom before the session officially began, she wasn't expecting trouble, but her instincts, they buzzed. And when she saw Colton at the front of the room, hands on his hips, lips curled in contempt, she felt it in her bones. Something was about to break. She just didn't know how fast it would fall. The courtroom didn't breathe, not for a full 10 seconds. After the slap, it was as if time had paused, horrified, stunned, waiting. Judge Naomi Ellison stood still. Her cheek burned, not from pain, but from the weight of what had just happened. And then, calmly, coldly, she spoke. "Is this how you treat officers of the court, Sergeant?" Colton blinked. He wasn't processing, wasn't understanding. He was reacting. "You came at me," he spat. "I didn't know who you were." "That's not what I asked," Naomi interrupted. Her voice was ice. "Did you strike me, yes or no?" Whispers rippled through the gallery. A public defender pulled out her phone, already recording. The courtroom camera's red light blinked in the corner. This wasn't going away. "I thought," Colton started. "You thought I was beneath you," Naomi said, stepping forward. The bailiff, Deputy Charles Denton, stirred for the first time. Not in confusion, in recognition. He'd seen this before, Colton's temper, his recklessness. But this was different. Naomi stepped up onto the bench, one foot then the other. Silence stretched tight as wire. Then she sat, behind the desk, behind the seal, behind the weight of the law, now fully a judge. Colton paled, his jaw tightened, his throat bobbed once, and for the first time in years, he looked afraid. Naomi clasped her hands and let the silence crush him. "Sergeant Ryan Colton," she said slowly, "you are now the subject of judicial review for assaulting a sitting judge during court proceedings. On record, on camera, in front of witnesses." Colton's mouth opened, then closed. Someone in the back whispered, "Holy hell." Naomi turned to the bailiff. "Deputy Denton, is this courtroom under live surveillance?" "Yes, Your Honor," he said immediately. His voice was tight, but steady. "Good. Enter into the record that the event was captured on video and corroborated by multiple witnesses." She turned back to Colton. "You've had 20 years of not meaning it," she said. "But this time," she leaned forward. "This time, you struck a judge." Colton tried again. "You're overreacting. I was doing my job. That kid's a thug." "Enough." Naomi's gavel cracked through the air. "You don't get to justify assault by pointing at a teenager." She faced the clerk. "Ms. Harper, record this. The arresting officer in case NUF 4873 is now under judicial detainment pending formal charges." Colton looked around. No allies, no lifelines, just blinking lights and cameras and the sound of his own career collapsing. And Naomi? She didn't flinch, because this wasn't over. It was just the start. By noon, the footage had already made its rounds. Cell phone clips, security feeds, courtroom audio synced with the moment of impact. The slap, the silence, the shift, and Judge Naomi Ellison's voice, level and lethal, delivering the first blow to a man who thought himself untouchable. But in Charleston, truth didn't travel alone. It always came with consequences. By 1 p.m., Naomi was called into an emergency meeting with the Ethics Oversight Board. They used words like impartiality, emotional conflict, and recusal for appearance of bias. Sitting across from her were 3 men. 2 lawyers in pressed gray suits, and 1 ethics officer named Reed Donovan who looked like a scarecrow in a courtroom. And standing next to them, stone-faced, was Assistant District Attorney Preston Vaughn. He didn't blink, didn't flinch, just stood there waiting to watch the system protect itself. "Judge Ellison," Donovan began. "In light of the altercation involving Officer Colton, we believe it may be prudent for you to step away from the case to preserve public trust." Naomi folded her hands on the table. "Are you suggesting I recuse myself because I was assaulted in my own courtroom?" Donovan hesitated. "It's not about the incident itself. It's about perception. It's about precedent," Naomi cut in. "Because if I step back now, we teach the next officer that violence silences accountability." Vaughn finally spoke. "With respect, Your Honor, if this becomes a media circus, the prosecution may be compromised." Naomi's eyes sharpened. "You mean, the prosecution's protection may be compromised?" She stood slowly, deliberately. "I'm not stepping down. I'm requesting this case be elevated to special judicial review, and that the footage be submitted for federal investigation," Donovan stammered. "That's not how we handle things in Charleston." Naomi's voice rose, just enough to carry. "Then maybe that's the problem." She turned to her clerk, Isaiah Brooks, who had been silent until now. "Isaiah, prepare a public statement. The people deserve transparency." He nodded, face pale but resolute. As Naomi walked toward the door, Vaughn spoke one last time. "You're making this personal." Naomi paused, turned just enough to meet his gaze. "This became personal," she said. "The moment a man felt he could strike me and the system would protect him." Outside, the media had already gathered. Microphones, questions, flashing cameras. Naomi didn't flinch, didn't blink. She stepped up to the podium and spoke just one sentence. "I will not recuse myself for surviving violence." And the crowd, silent at first, broke into scattered applause. Because a storm was coming, and for once, it was headed in the other direction. That night, Naomi didn't sleep. She sat in her chambers long after the courthouse emptied. The slap still rang in her cheek. Faint now, but not forgotten. It wasn't the sting of skin. It was the echo of every time someone like her had been told to sit down, shut up, and stay quiet. But Naomi wasn't built for silence. She was still reviewing her notes when Agent Selena Ward arrived. Department of Justice, Internal Affairs. And with her, Agent Marco Velez, sharp-eyed and quiet. They weren't here for pleasantries. Selena pulled a flash drive from her coat. "Footage is secured. Chain of custody is verified," she said. "Sotomal is sostroy." Then Ixaring Mikina folder across the table. "We've been watching Officer Colton for years," Marco added, "but nothing ever stuck." Naomi flipped through the pages. 19 complaints, 6 involving excessive force, 2 sealed settlements, 3 missing body cams, all quietly dismissed, all tied to the same supervising officers, all signed off by the same district attorney, Preston Vaughn. Naomi's heart beat faster. "This wasn't just about Colton," she said. Selena nodded. "He's not the rot, he's just the smell." The documents didn't stop with Colton. Another name appeared again and again. Judge Milton Granger. Naomi's jaw tightened. Granger wasn't just a judge. He was the judge. Her mentor. The man who'd sworn her in. The one who once told her, "We changed the system from inside." Now his signature appeared on 3 closed cases where Colton had been exonerated, even when the evidence said otherwise. Another pattern emerged, a string of plea deals, all with young black male defendants, all without full trials, all negotiated by Vaughn, and at the center of it all, a private security firm in Atlanta. Naomi frowned. "What's this?" Marco leaned in. "Shell company. Connected to city contracts. Guess who approved the last payment?" He flipped the page. Naomi stared at the signature. Chief Everett Monroe. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "The police chief. They've been protecting each other for years," Selena said. "Politicians, prosecutors, judges. And now they're circling the wagons," Marco added. Naomi leaned back, eyes scanning the mess in front of her. This wasn't about her anymore. It wasn't even about Colton. It was about a machine, built to crush dissent, built to hide its tracks, built to survive off silence. And they thought she'd go quietly. Naomi closed the folder and looked up. "Then let's burn the whole thing into the light." Selena smiled. "We were hoping you'd say that. Because now the war wasn't just personal. It was systemic. And she wasn't just going after one man. She was coming for every name that let him believe he'd never fall." The smear campaign started at 2:17 a.m. A headline, anonymous source, Judge Naomi Ellison accused of bias in 2009 sentencing. No citation, no evidence, just enough to plant doubt. By dawn, it was everywhere. Social media lit up with hashtags, "Fiacinteresim activist Judge Ellison unfit, resign now." Cable news debated her impartiality. Anonymous callers flooded her courthouse voicemail. One even contacted her nephew's school, pretending to be a concerned parent. And then, a plain envelope arrived at her chambers. No return address. Inside, just a photo. Her nephew, Evan, walking home from school. On the back, in jagged handwriting, "Stay in your lane." Naomi's hands clenched. This wasn't fear. This was fury, boiling slow, quiet, and cold. She called in Deputy Isaiah Brooks. "Get my sister on the line. Pull Evan out of school, quietly." Isaiah nodded and left, face pale. Moments later, Agent Selena Ward arrived. She read the threat, then said what Naomi already knew. "They're scared." Naomi looked out the window. Good, but fear makes monsters desperate. By noon, a request was filed with the Judicial Oversight Committee, demanding Naomi's removal for emotional compromise. Leading the charge, Ada Preston Vaughn, the same man her investigation had tied to multiple plea deal manipulations. They were trying to flip the script, make the abuser the victim, and the judge the threat. But Naomi didn't flinch. Instead, she called a press conference. At exactly 3 p.m., she stood on the steps of the Charleston courthouse. Not in robes, not in armor. In black slacks, gray blouse, voice clear, spine straight. "This is no longer about a slap," she began. "This is about a system built to silence the people who stand for truth." She raised a folder. In this document are the names of 12 individuals who knowingly protected Officer Colton and buried justice to maintain their power. Gasps. Cameras flashed. She didn't flinch. Some are police, some are prosecutors. One is a sitting judge. I have submitted these names to federal investigators. I will not read them aloud today. Not because I'm afraid of backlash, but because I still believe in due process. Then she paused, just long enough, and I believe the people watching deserve better than shadows. That night, her phone buzzed. A message, no contact name. "You're making enemies you can't see." She stared at the screen, then locked it, then looked at her reflection. "I've faced worse," she whispered. And deep inside her, the fear didn't vanish. It transformed into resolve. They came for her in the dark. not with handcuffs or headlines, but with silence, sharpened like a knife. The threat stopped being subtle. Another photo arrived. Her sister Danielle leaving the grocery store. This time, no message, just the image, a warning wrapped in a smile. Naomi didn't blink. She forwarded the photo to the U.S. Marshals. "Move them," she said. By morning, Danielle and Evan were in protective custody, escorted to an undisclosed location. No more games. Back at the courthouse, Naomi met with Agent Selena Ward and DOJ Rep Erica Lynn. The news was clear. Colton's handlers are panicking. He'd been moved overnight. No documentation, no chain of custody. A backdoor deal was being whispered in hallways Naomi never had access to before. But she wasn't alone anymore. Selena placed a new folder on the desk. "We traced the burner phone," she said. It pinged twice, once at a downtown precinct, the other from a private security firm tied to the mayor's re-election PAC. Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Corruption isn't a crack in the system. It's the damn blueprint," she muttered. Erica leaned in. "Judge, you still have one option. A federal injunction. It would freeze all Colton-related prosecutions and force an external audit of every plea deal tied to his arrests. But it would come with a cost." Naomi paused. "Do it." At 3:14 p.m., a message popped up on her phone. Colton in federal custody. Arrested without incident. She didn't smile. She just exhaled. Because the battle wasn't over. It was only beginning to turn. That evening, she stepped into the courtroom where it all started. No cameras, no press, just the echo of truth. Colton wasn't smirking now. He was pale, small, shrinking in his seat. The charges read like a roadmap of rot. Assault on a federal judge, obstruction of justice, perjury, witness intimidation, criminal conspiracy. His lawyer asked for leniency. Naomi, sitting as a witness, not as a judge, rose. Her voice didn't waver. "I'm not here for vengeance. I'm here because people need to see what happens when power goes unchecked." Colton couldn't look at her. He wasn't ashamed. He was defeated. Later that week, the first wave of indictments hit Charleston like a thunderclap. 12 names. Ada Preston Vaughn, 2 senior officers, a former judge, a city council member, and the shadowy lobbyist who once whispered in Colton's ear. Naomi walked through the courthouse lobby as protesters held signs outside. "Justice for Jalen. No more silence." She made them look. She stopped for a moment, took it in. Not the applause, but the shift. The way truth, once buried, was now rising through concrete. And it had cost her everything. Her peace, her privacy, almost her family. But it had also earned something rare. Real change. It didn't end with a verdict. It didn't end with applause, indictments, or press conferences. For Judge Naomi Ellison, it ended on a quiet Sunday morning. On her front porch. No reporters, no threats, just the soft hum of a city waking up. A city that finally saw what had always been there. Naomi sipped her coffee slowly. Her hands, once trembling from adrenaline and anger, were calm. She wasn't returning to the bench. Not because she was forced out, but because she had done what she came to do. She lit the match, and the house of silence was still burning. Inside her home, a small photo sat on the table. Her and Evan, laughing, taken just days after the indictments. He had looked up at her and whispered, "You made them listen." She hadn't answered then, because she wasn't sure they had. But now as the dust settled, maybe they hadn't just listened. Maybe, for once, they'd learned. Across town, the district court building bore a new plaque on its conference room door. The Ellison Room, dedicated to relentless integrity. But Naomi never visited it. "Change doesn't need monuments," she once told Isaiah Brooks. "It needs momentum." And her momentum had ignited something bigger than her name. Over 200 plea deals were reopened. 3 new federal judges were appointed under a transparency review. The state passed the Judicial Accountability Act, mandating public review of officer-linked dismissals. It wasn't a revolution, but it was a shift. One verdict, one case, one citizen at a time. That night, Naomi stood beneath the Charleston stars. She thought of her mother, who never got to see her wear the robe, of her father, who taught her how to speak calmly even when the room burned, and of every young woman walking into law school right now, wondering if justice had room for her voice. Naomi smiled, just barely. Then she whispered, not to anyone in particular, "Make them look, even if they pretend they can't hear. Because justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it echoes through generations. And sometimes all it takes to start the echo is one hand refusing to stay silent when it's been slapped. Now it's your turn. If the system failed you, would you speak? Would you stand when it's easier to sit? Would you risk it all to make one wrong visible? Let us know in the comments. If this story made you pause, like it. If it made you think, share it. And if you believe stories like this matter, subscribe for more. Because truth isn't always loud, but when it's real, it never leaves. Some courtroom moments don't end with a gavel. They end with a silence so heavy, it echoes through generations. This wasn't just a story about a slap. It was about a system built on silence, and a woman who refused to stay quiet. Judge Naomi Ellison didn't win with rage. She won with clarity, with courage, with a commitment to justice, even when it came at a cost. Because sometimes changing the system doesn't require shouting. Sometimes you just have to stand when everyone else sits. If this story moved you, if it made you question power, if it made you feel something real, leave a comment. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to KaYi for stories that don't just entertain, they awaken. Because truth doesn't always arrive with thunder. But when it's real, it never leaves.